Welcome back to the world of Squid Games. Who would have thought that adults playing a bunch of children's games to the death would be so entertaining? Watching them play these children's games once again got me thinking just how dangerous are these games? While they may look all fun, bright, and colorful, we know that failing at any one of these is permanent, which makes these some of the most dangerous games that have ever been played. But I can't help but wonder, which is the worst? Which one of these is the most dangerous game to play? I know that none of these players have a choice in which game they play, except if you're choosing which minigame you play for your team in the Pentathlon, but what if you did? What if you could choose which Squid game you played? I feel like that would encourage so many more people to play, especially the gamblers. They love their odds. But I want to know, which of the Squid games do you have the best odds of surviving? Because now that 2 full seasons of Squid Games has come out and we're waiting on season 3, we have a lot of games to look at. And not just the actual games, but also the games played outside of the competition. Rock, paper, scissors -1 doesn't have great odds considering you're going to be 1v1ing somebody and one of you is going to lose, but surprisingly enough, there's a game that is way more deadly than this. Yeah, I was surprised too. And originally, I thought it had to be red light, green light, especially in season 1. Just the sheer panic alone that swept through the crowd after the first kill killed off such a huge number of people, but nope, it's not this one either. We're going to go through every single Squid game and see just how deadly they are, so if you ever have to choose, you know which one you have the best odds of surviving, or winning at the very least. Let's go ahead and start with season 1's red light, green light. To start the show off strong, episode 1, we see 456 contestants play red light, green light, and only one of these players knew what to expect. Of course, number 1, Ilnam, the creator of the Squid Games himself, knows the game and might be the reason that more people didn't get gunned down at the start of the game. You essentially have this football field that you have to make it across in under 5 minutes. But the thing is, you don't actually have the full 5 minutes to make it across. You can only walk or run across while the giant doll is turned away from you and singing. And do you know how much time that is? Well, I sat down and scrubbed through the entire game frame by frame just so I could tell you. In the first game, we see the contestants have 25 different turns to run throughout the 5 minutes. When the game starts, it gives the players the longest moments to run. The doll will usually sing for 6 seconds. She does this for the first 4 times. After this, you have less and less time to run each turn. The next 4 times, she turns around and you only have 3 to 4 seconds to run. And then the next 6 times she does it, you only have 2 to 3 seconds to run. Now, the last 8 times we're either looking at the front man or it's in slow motion, but following the pattern, it seems like the next 8 times will also be 2 to 3 seconds each. Now, all 25 of these turns give us a combined time of 1 minute and 29.5 seconds. Now, already this is a lot less than the 5 minutes it just felt like we had a second ago. And while there's no concrete length for how long this field actually is, if you didn't realize it, Netflix did a real-life version of the Squid Games, a game show called Squid Games: The Challenge, where they gathered 456 players and had them compete in all the same games for $4.56 million. And the dimensions for the replica field they built for their red light, green light game was 328 feet by 131 feet, just 32 feet shorter than a football field, which means that to cross the finish line in 1 minute and 29.5 seconds, you have to move at an average pace of 2.5 miles an hour, or just a little over 4 kilometers per hour for all you lucky people that use the metric system. And that is with 0 seconds to spare. Well, actually, you have that half a second left, but honestly, I'd prefer a little extra time, closer to 10 seconds, which means a more brisk 2.8 miles an hour or 4.5 kilometers per hour. And this is an average, including the time it takes you to slow down to a stop before the doll turns around and sees you. And that's not accounting for any lost time because other players are playing dirty or clinging to you to save them. This could easily set you back another 2 turns, meaning you would have to move at least 3 miles an hour or 4.8 kilometers an hour. Now, even if you manage to do that, you still have to avoid accidentally moving after everyone has to stop. And I'm sure you think you'll be fine, but so did all of these other players who accidentally moved, or swayed a little bit too much, or even tripped. With the amount of pressure that this game would have, most people would be shaking and their nerves would be going crazy. With that much adrenaline pumping through you, you might have a little less control over your body's movements than normal. Now, after the majority got scared and ran off and got killed, they show most of the board and it's missing 120 players. There's 14 more gunshots, suggesting that 134 players were killed off because of the initial scare. Also, there's around 35 shots killing players that moved up until it cuts away to the frontman. There's about twice as much more time in the game, so if 70 died from movement errors and 201 survived, that means around 185 died from the initial scare. I'm happy to settle for a halfway number of 160, which means if you know the game's premise and are not one of the 160 players that gets killed off from the initial scare of getting shot if you lose the game, that means that 95 players get killed off just for moving after the doll says red light. So each time you're allowed to run forward, on average, 4 people will fail to stop on time. The odds of it being you, because of an accident, start out at 1.5%, or 1 person in every 70. But by the end of the turns, you have a 2% chance of being one of the 4 that fails to stop in time, or 1 in 50. There's so much that goes into this game that you don't even think about. Yeah, at a quick glance, red light, green light seems easy with 5 minutes, but as soon as you look at all the little details, it starts looking pretty scary. And surprisingly enough, only 5% of the people that watched the last video were actually subscribed. That's such a small number, guys. What are you doing? Just go down there and smash the subscribe button if you want the absolute best chances of surviving the Squid Games. I've got a couple more fun videos I want to make on Season 2 that you're not going to want to miss. And with Season 3 coming out this year, you're definitely going to want to be subscribed so you don't miss out on all the fun. So, like we're saying, we started the first game off with 456 players and 255 were eliminated. That means that 56% of the player base was killed off, which is huge. Going into the next game with the Dalgona, we now only have 187 players. If you remember, the majority of the players voted to end the games, and so they did. But they were given an option to return and keep playing, and so that's why we have 14 less players. Yeah, they're still in debt, but at least they're alive. But this game is extremely simple. It consists of a hard sugar cookie with a shape pressed into it. You get a sewing needle and you have 10 minutes to scrape, lick, or bite your shape out of the cookie without the final shape having any cracks. It sounds fairly easy until you see the shapes. If you recognize what's going on and get to choose your shape, the triangle is definitely the easiest with just 3 straight sides. Next is the circle. Just go slowly and you should be fine as long as you don't crack it in half. The star, on the other hand, is much harder, but not the hardest. You have 10 small sides that all need to be scraped away with equal amounts of pressure so you don't break any of the tips off. But finally, the umbrella, the impossible shape. While I'm sure that's what many of the people who got this shape thought, Gi-hoon actually shows us by finishing his at the very last second that it is actually possible. I really wish we could see what percentage of the players that got each shape passed or failed, but unfortunately that's data we just don't get. It does seem like the first wave of players finished around the halfway point, most likely a lot of the triangle and circle players. I'm sure some took their time and went even slower, but if you were lucky enough to get an easy shape, I'm sure you felt way better about your odds. By the end of the 10 minutes, 108 players have successfully finished their shapes. 57 players went too fast or messed up and got cracks and were eliminated during the game, and 22 of the players ran out of time and were eliminated after the 10 minutes. Starting with 187, 79 total players were eliminated, which was 42%. While probably equally as nerve-wracking, this percentage was much lower, giving you way better survival chances at this game. But not in the next game. Tug of War is up next, and this is one of the few that literally cuts the player base right down the middle. 50% will be killed off whether they like it or not, and your odds alone rely on how fast you can join a team that has physical strength. Like a lot of other YouTubers have tested, there's not much strategy that will actually help you win Tug of War like the show makes it seem, so this game surprisingly is largely based on the player's size. Larger and stronger seeming players will have easier times joining groups with other strong players, whereas the smaller players will most likely get grouped together and more times than not will unfortunately be weeded out. But that's a little surprising to me. First off, this is all reliant on the players choosing their teams. If this is grouped randomly, you've got a solid 50-50 chance of surviving. If you're smaller and people are choosing your teams, you're pretty much screwed. But this almost isn't like the games. We're repeatedly reminded how the games are played fairly by the rules, and they want to ensure that every player has the same chance to win the prize. They don't want it to seem rigged or like the games favor a certain type of player. The whole point is that anyone could win the games. They're literally for the rich to bet on because they're bored in life. So most likely the teams of stronger players would be pitted against each other while the teams of smaller players would go up against other teams of the same size, ensuring that each match will somewhat be balanced and give most players a similar chance at winning, while also giving the VIPs a good show each time. Nobody wants to watch the same thing over and over again. Not only would it get boring to them, but also it would be no fun to bet on. I say with Tug of War, you have a 50% chance chance of survival. Going into this was 80 players, 27 died in the nighttime killings before and 1 died from a fight, but after Tug of War, 40 remain. Marbles 2 is another game like Tug of War, where 50% of the players will get killed off, I thought, because everyone is split up in groups of 2. One player wins, one player loses, right? But more than 50% died in this game. Yeah, I never realized this until now. Everyone is allowed to choose the game you play, so if you played a lot of marbles as a kid, theoretically you could suggest playing a game that you're good at to have a better chance of winning. But your opponent can request a new game that you're awful at. There's so many different factors that go into winning this game, from if you played marbles as a kid or if your opponent did, and then all the skills needed to win those games, from strategy or precision throwing, and some are random, luck or bluff based. And even if you win, your opponent could choose a new game that you just suck at. This game I thought would be an easy 50% chance of survival, but I forgot the element you have to fight, the clock. And while it is a 30-minute timer, you and your partner need to come up with and both agree on a game to play, go over the rules so they're well established, play the actual game, and possibly play another. It could be a short game, but some people might choose to play longer games. There was 38 players that started this game and only 17 survived. 55% failed. There should have been 19 survivors, but it seems that 2 of the groups either didn't finish their game in time or couldn't declare a winner. Which, if you're paired up with a family member or someone you're close to, that's entirely possible, so we'll include it. Marbles is actually more dangerous than Tug of War, surprisingly. Next is the bridge game. This consists of 18 pairs of glass tiles. The entirety of the players need to make it across single file. One of the 2 tiles is a stronger tempered glass which can hold 2 players, and the other tile is normal glass that will break from 1 person. It seems simple, but as the game goes on, it gets harder with each turn. Not only is there a 16-minute countdown, but there's only 16 players, meaning that if by some random chance each person lands on the wrong tile and you're the last one, you still have to guess the right tile 3 times in a row to win. But trust me, don't worry about that. The odds of everyone getting it wrong but you are so astronomically low, it's crazy. But the 50-50 decision is not the only thing you have to worry about. Since all the players will be going single file behind the other, it's very possible in the real scenario that the player who's supposed to go next simply refuses. And this can happen anywhere from the first turn to the last. The players got to choose their number, but they had no idea what it meant. Of course, if you go last, your odds are thousands of times better than if you're going first. But if the order truly is random, it's just up to chance. If you are first, you could choose to not go, but an angry player behind you could literally push you forward since everyone needs to go by you. This game is so brutal without even trying. Another thing you might not think about at first is, what if everyone guesses the right tiles? You have to remember all the correct tiles that were guessed ahead of you in order to win now. Most times it will be single file with 1 player on each tile, but if you lag behind a couple or forget or don't see which ones the players in front of you jumped on, your odds go down really quickly if you have to choose the right one all over again. 16 players started this game and only 3 survived. This game has a shocking fatality rate of 81%, which is insane. And you might say that the percentage is so high because there was only 16 players. And while this is a game they save for when there's a smaller number of players, I'm sure if there was 50 or so, there would be the same amount of tiles in relation to the players. Meaning, since there was 1.125 tiles per player and say there was 50 players, there would most likely be 56 tiles, so the odds were similar. But then the timer would also have to be extended to 50 minutes, and that just would be too long. Either way, 81% is the failure rate for the bridge game. And then finally for Season 1 is the Squid game itself, which, since it was a 1v1 again, it's a 50% chance of survival. But originally there was supposed to be 3 players, before San-woo killed Se-byuk in the night. The game makers definitely set it up for the players to eliminate one person overnight with the steak knives and then stop them after one person died. I think this was meant to be a 2-player game, and so you have a 50% chance of winning. Surviving that night itself is a 66% chance, but still. Now we're moving on to the Season 2 games. Unfortunately, they only got through 3 of this year's 6 games, but we also have the infamous rock, paper, scissors -1 that the recruiter introduced us to, which is what we're going to start with. Rock, paper, scissors in itself gives you 1 in 3 odds of winning. Since -1 comes down to the same 2 choices, it stays the same. But with the Russian roulette after each loss, your odds of failure get another 1 in 6 shot. Literally. But once one person loses, the game stops there, ultimately being another one of the 50% 50% games. If this was played in the actual Squid Games, I'm sure they would treat it like marbles and pair everyone up in twos without them knowing why. This would pair up a lot of families and friends, so the tensions would be high just like marbles, but letting the show just focus on one two-player game allowed for so much more tension. This game was insane to watch. Episode 1 had my heart racing the most, and while rock, paper, scissors is somewhat dependent on strategy, in the heat of the moment with the added -1, there's too much to think about too fast. You would have to randomly have a lot of experience playing this to have an edge over your opponent. This game remains at a 50% rate of survival. Interestingly enough, we return to red light, green light, this time with a lot more survivors. And what's surprising about this year's game is that they made it harder for the players and we didn't even realize it. Yeah, so do you remember how in Season 1, the turns start out 6 seconds long and then go down to 5, 4, 3, and then 2 seconds long? Well, this year they start off at 4 seconds and just stick to that almost the entire game. They do go down to around 3 seconds towards the end, but this year there's only 22 turns to run forward. That might not seem like a big difference compared to Season 1 with 25 turns, but on average, the second year's turns are 0.2 of a second shorter, meaning instead of having 1 minute and 29.5 seconds, you now only have 1 minute and 26 seconds. And I couldn't help but wonder why they made less turns this year, but I don't think they did it on purpose. The first year, when the initial scare happened and everyone is running around getting eliminated, from red light to green light, the whole turn takes 2 minutes on the dot, which leaves you 3 minutes to finish the game. But in Season 2, unfortunately, it lasted a bit longer. It took 2 minutes 48 seconds this time, leaving only 2 minutes and 12 seconds for the rest of the turns. Which makes me think, if it took less time for the panic, they might have gotten a few extra turns in. It's crazy that even that, the losers getting eliminated, affects the rest of the players and how much time they have to cross the field. This year, Gi-hoon really helped the players in the one game they used again. He gave them clear and helpful instructions guiding them the whole way. But it just goes to show, even still, you can't save everybody. The initial scare only killed off 71 players this time, which is a huge difference. And in the remainder of the game, only 20 more were killed off due to moving. So not only was the fatality rate 20% this season instead of Season 1's 56%, but Gi-hoon also saved 80% of the players that on average would have lost the remainder of the game due to moving when they shouldn't have. In Season 1, 95 players died to movement, whereas in the second game, largely due to the line strategy Gi-hoon suggested, only 20 extra people failed. That's close to only one person failing each turn, and compare that to the 220 that survived the scare, your odds are so much better this year than they were last year. Everyone say a big thank you to Gi-hoon for that. They had less time to complete the challenge, but so many more passed. Next is the Pentathlon. Not only is this a 6-legged race, but each person has to complete their own minigame while attached to the other players before they can move on. This game, surprisingly enough, has the possibility for everybody to survive, which is extremely rare. And originally for this game, they were going to be given 10 minutes each to complete it, but the director said when they actually started playing, everyone was completing it in 5 minutes. So that's just what the time changed to. And while these are all children's games, if you've got guards with MP5s ready to gun you and your friends down, your nerves are going crazy and adrenaline is once again through the roof. Not only do you need teamwork to complete this event, but everybody has to contribute. One person cannot carry the entire team through this game. They started these games with 365 players, which is way more than expected due to Gi-hoon saving everyone in red light, green light, and even though this game caught him off guard, there was only a 30% fatality rate. Only 91 players lost, leaving the surviving players at 255, which is crazy high after the second game. In Season 1, after the first 2 games, there was only 108 players left. But lucky for us, the crazy insane carousel game of Mingle is up next to thin the crowd. All the players stand on the rotating circle in the middle and it actually spins with all of them on it. Across from them is a circular room surrounding them that has 50 individual rooms. Once the carousel stops, the announcer says a number and everyone needs to form groups of that number and make it into the rooms within 30 seconds. Other than that, there's no timer for this game. You have no idea how long it will go for. The carousel starts spinning and the first number is 10. With 255 players, almost everybody can easily survive. Get in groups of 10 and you only use 25 of the 50 rooms. There will be 5 people left over that will get killed off as a minimum though. But in the chaos of the moment, Gi-hoon watched at least 30 people fail this round, and it's more likely around 40 got eliminated, which is 17%. The next round starts and then the terrifying happens. It's okay if they say a big number like 10 because that means there's enough rooms for everyone to survive, minus however many won't make up the number in the last room unless the player base is equally divisible by that number. If there was 250 players, they could all live, but since it's 255, the extra 5 will automatically be eliminated. What you don't want to hear is a small number. Next, they say 4. With around 210 players left, you need 52 rooms, meaning that at least 10 people will be eliminated at minimum. Everyone goes crazy, but again, not everyone can fill up the rooms, and around 40 more get eliminated, which is 20%. Now we're down 87 players and there's 168 remaining. Next round they say 3, and not enough people get eliminated for everyone to survive. With 168 players, you need 56 rooms for everyone to survive, so a minimum of 18 players will be executed. Not everyone can figure it out, and 27 people lose, or 16%. With 141 players left, they start round 4, the carousel stops and they say 6, which is good. You could use only 23 of the rooms and the odd number only leaves 3 to be eliminated. Of course, best case doesn't happen and 15 people lose, but that's only 11%. And this next round is the final round. The front man tells them, as if he figured it out, that since there are 126 people left and only 50 rooms, the number is going to be 2. 100 people can survive and the rest will be slaughtered. They say 2, and everyone fills the rooms. There's an extra person in the front man's room that he has to kill, so there's technically only 2 living players in the room. But honestly, I can't imagine that was the only room this happened to. I would think the other 25 extra players would be fighting to the death trying to get into those rooms. This should have been the most violent, cutthroat round of them all, but we didn't really get to see any of that because we were focused on this important character moment that showed Inho's true colors. So while it did work out, and apparently there wasn't groups of 3 or 4 that were still fighting after the 30 seconds, apparently 100 players did survive. A little unbelievable compared to the other game scenarios, but whatever. This round, 21% was killed off. On average, 17% of the players would lose each round. This game had an overall death rate though of 61%, which is a lot. I think going into this, the goal was to get the player base down to 100, just so it wasn't too big for the next game. Usually, once the players realize no matter where a player dies, the prize pool still goes up and that's one less competitor, all the crazy ones go on a killing spree. In Season 1, they learned this early on and killed 27 people off. In Season 2, they don't learn this until the bathroom fight. And that's after the 3rd game. 5 players die in the bathroom fight, and then that night, 42 more people get killed off, bringing the amount of players left down to 53. But then Gi-hoon takes 12 on a little rebellion, and 9 of those die, giving us a total of 46 remaining players left in the Squid Games at the end of Season 2. Honestly, I would have thought that the red light, green light would have taken the spot for the most dangerous game just from the sheer amount of players that die from the initial scare, but I was not expecting the bridge game to be so bad. Even Mingle was more cutthroat and felt more dangerous, but the odds are just so much more against you when you're given a 50-50 chance 18 times in a row. Going into this breakdown, I thought the games like Tug of War or Marbles, where it's 50%, would be the worst, but besides the Pentathlon and Dalgona, they were the easiest. Tell me which game you would play in the comments, subscribe and send this to your friends that watch the Squid Games, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.